you gloriously miserable accursed. We are recording this the morning after the Freeland torpedo hit the Trudeau hull. There are so many aspects of this story to talk about. The idea of replacing the finance minister in the first place, the way it was handled, her response, the aftershocks, and where it all goes. You've got the team here to talk you through it. Kory Teneycke, Jordan Leichnitz, and Scott Reid. Some days, some weekends, we banter back and forth over email trying to figure out what the hell we're going to talk about on the Curse of Politics on any given week. But that is not the case today. I don't know about you guys. I was never able to catch up with all the emails and messages that I was getting yesterday. It was impossible to keep current with what was going on. World of Politics was buzzing. And by the way, just in case you're interested, the day ended with the CPC getting 2/3 of the vote in a by-election in British Columbia in a Liberal-held riding. The Liberal vote dropped by 20 points, the NDP vote dropped by 10 points, and the CPC gained 30 points. Jesus Christ. Okay, so the three of you spent all day yesterday on TV sets. You got anything left to say, Scott?
God, anything left to say? I mean, to me, we're recording this at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, Eastern Time, Canada, planet Earth, and
solar system, Milky Way, etc.
Exactly. I couldn't remember what solar system we were. I've visited so many. But, you know, what's unclear is how the next 24 to 48 hours unfold, and whether we're halfway through a 2-day story about the prime minister stepping down, or whether we're at the beginning of a story about the prime minister trying to dig in, and I assume ultimately getting pried out. So it's pretty fascinating. For all those reasons, I'll just seize on the thing that I found most interesting about the entire day yesterday. And that was an obvious thing, but it just sinks in more and more and more as I think about it more and more and more. How deliberate, how intentional Chrystia Freeland was. Now, she's not someone that this panel...
Well, hold on. Let's get into it. Let's not get into that right now, because I want to do this in an orderly fashion.
All right, then. Sorry.
I want to do this in an orderly fashion. And by the way, I'm just going to throw you a tidbit.
Yeah.
Curse of Politics has a worldwide exclusive of overnight polling data from Abacus.
Oh, my. And?
Well, do you want me to tell you now, or do you want me to tell you
I don't know. I'm not allowed to talk about Chrystia Freeland now. I can't talk about the poll now. What the fuck? Right. What are we? Should we exchange recipes? I've got...
I don't want to tell you the poll numbers right now, because then we'll go down that rabbit hole. And there's the thing I want to talk about first, Jordan, is this. With all of your reflection, do you have any idea, do you know what Trudeau was trying to accomplish by moving her out of finance? Let's just start with that.
Yeah. It's a great question. The initial decision, well, and I think the whole, as we've talked about before, there were communication issues from her. There was grounds to move her 2 shuffles ago. And now I think with the time machine, and if you flip that telescope around backwards, we can see that really would have been the time to do it. I think that there was a couple things at play. So the first and maybe most obvious one is figuring out if Carney was serious about his courtship of coming into cabinet, then there was a need to maybe make some space for him. But I also think that, there's a recognition in the PMO that she wasn't connecting with people on affordability issues. And so the solution to that was they were going to try to have her deliver this economic statement with the much larger than anticipated deficit numbers, and then axe her afterwards in order to demonstrate some sort of change in direction. And perhaps unsurprisingly, she was not interested in being a doormat. And so that precipitated all of this. But I think what really struck me yesterday, as everything unfolded, was the degree to which the Liberals and the PMO are now caught in a cunning trap 100% of their own making. They created absolutely every last piece of the circumstances that led to the crisis yesterday, and they are the sole and 100% true authors of what I think could be ultimately the government's undoing.
Kory, I do not fucking understand this, okay? Who were they intending to replace her with? I mean, what were they always planning to make Dominic LeBlanc the Minister of Finance when they had that conversation on Friday? Was Dominic their choice? Like, what were they doing?
Well, I think that's unlikely, given that, if you're to believe what Dom said, he was asked yesterday afternoon, like around 1:00.
Right.
If that was all part of a grand master plan that started on Friday, that would be an unusual time to call him and him in, and the confusion about who was going to deliver the fall economic statement wouldn't have been so confusing. You got to think that there was something brewing with Carney, and that was the plan. But I don't have any information to say that's the case, other than all the speculation that was going on prior about him joining cabinet. I can't imagine him wanting to join in any role other than that role. And you got to assume that was part of the speculation, and that was going on around that was at least partially grounded in fact that there was some conversation happening. I agree with Jordan that they wanted her to eat a giant steaming bowl of shit on going over her fiscal guardrails, owning a GST cut that she didn't support, and on and on. Why you wouldn't want to do that is pretty, I think, self-evident. That said, I think there's another reason to move her out. If your finance minister doesn't agree at all with the major elements of your fiscal plan that you're forcing her to put in the budget, like that should be grounds to go somewhere else. If that disagreement is that fundamental and the tension around it is that high.
But what was the rush for Friday?
Yeah, you got to think that there was some other talks going on, I guess. But they seemed flat-footed that she left, caught flat-footed by it. I don't think if they thought there was going to be all that drama that Katie Telford would have hopped on a plane and went on vacation. You got to think that it was totally a surprise to them. I think probably in hindsight, it's not very much of a surprise. But they seem to be shocked by what actually transpired.
Scott, wrap this up for us. In addition to leaving beside all the fallout of it and how it went down, what were they trying to do?
Well, that's the thing it's one of the many things that I keep chewing on. Like, I imagine that Friday meeting. Right. Hey, Christian, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in. Did you get a cup of coffee?
It's a Zoom call, by the way. It's a fucking Zoom call.
It's a Zoom call. Even better, even more intimate. Well, anyway, looking good. What's that on the wall? Oh, I see. Interesting. Oh, cool. Yeah. I've been to Ethiopia too. Look, here's the thing. You're doing a shitty job, and so I'm going to replace you. First, I want you to deliver the fall economic statement, the one that I wrote that you dislike, and I'd like you to deliver it. And then when it's received poorly, I will partially use its bad reception as justification for removing you from the job, which we both know is horseshit since I'm removing you from the job. Now, I'm not even sure which man I'm replacing you with. We'll find one at the shopping center.
They've got binders of men. Binders of men.
So it is staggering to me, and I know it sounds so searing, but they obviously just didn't anticipate. It's kind of like breaking up with your girlfriend and go like, well, should I break up with her? My birthday's next week. I bet she bought me something nice. I think I'll tell her now that I'm breaking up with her, but still expect to get the gift. It's insane logic. So the only thing I would say is that there is nothing in her political history that we've seen or that they have seen, presumably, that would suggest that she would react in the way that she did. Logic dictates that almost anybody would, but there's nothing specifically that would cause them to say, well, she might write a letter where she resigns, deliberately dump it without forewarning on the morning of the fall economic statement, intended to cause maximum harm, and include in there that she is not just upset with the direction of the Feds, but that we are fundamentally on different paths when it comes to managing the fisc and our trade negotiations with the United States of America. But I will be running, thank you very much, which, wink, wink, not too much of a nudge, nudge, is a declaration of open challenge. Like, they probably didn't anticipate that reaction because it's not something many of us would anticipate it. But hey, man, you treat people like hell, sometimes they rear up.
Yeah, Jordan, you were trying to get in here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the only thing that maybe makes me question a little bit the narrative around, well, she had so much disagreement with the pieces in the fall economic statement, like the GST and the checks. Well, she had already won the battle on the checks by all reports. So there had already been work put into, from her team to kind of rein things back into a territory she was more comfortable in. By all accounts, she and her team were quite happy with some of the investment pieces in the fall economic statement. So I'm not sure that it, in the end, to me, it seemed like it was less about really a fundamental division.
They were firing her. That's what it was about.
It was deeply personal.
What it was about.
It was deeply personal.
Of course.
That's what pushed her to go over the top with a grenade pin in her mouth, was because she was being treated like shit. And I do think it bears saying, by the same prime minister who just days earlier was, talking about the feminist importance of female representation in high political office.
No, listen. I think she did the Liberal Party a great favor yesterday because I think she advanced the timetable for Trudeau's departure. And that's important. So God bless her. Okay? But this is not a resignation over principle. She is not John Turner. Right? She was going to deliver this fall economic statement, and she was going to be the finance minister right through the election until they told her that she wasn't going to be. So it's as if John Turner was called in by Trudeau and said, we're going to make you the municipal affairs minister. And then Turner said, well, then I'm against wage and price controls. I mean, that's not a resignation on principle.
It's an interesting what if. It's an interesting what, I suppose. What did they offer her? Because if you're to believe all the pushback, they didn't want her in a central position with respect to negotiations. So it's not like they were turning her into, we're taking you out of finance and we're striking up the band from last time we dealt with Trump and you're going to be like super envoy, brand new position. So like it literally is, you're not going to be finance. You're not managing the trade file. So then what's left? Like, we'd like you to like organize a junk drawer. Like what? I mean, it's a curious question. And that may be part of why it was such a trigger. Like, it might have been insulting.
It's a thing they do, right? I mean, they put Wilson Raybould in Veterans Affairs.
Yeah. And, right? And Anita Anand is still organizing the
Deep Six and Treasury Board. Yeah.
I mean, they fucked these people when they fucked them.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, really, she's an excellent company.
There's some fucking back going on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of you have alluded to this, but what could they have been thinking about how that meeting would go? I mean, there's two things that confuse me about it. How did they think the meeting would go, and how did they misinterpret the meeting so badly? But let's just start with a matter of...
How'd they leave the meeting?
Basic common sense, Scott. How would you think that meeting would go well? Like, how would you think that at the end of that, everything would be happy? You go in and you say, exactly as you've said, you don't agree with this fall economic statement. I'm going to fire you. Go read the economic statement, and then I'm going to fire you afterwards. Like, who the fuck would do that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's preposterous. I'm also very puzzled, and I'm not playing this for laughs or anything, because it is startling to me. How did that meeting end? Like, how did that meeting end, and how could the Prime Minister and his office think that they were in an okay place with their Minister of Finance at the conclusion of that meeting? I mean, she went away and she said, I've decided that I'm going to compose a letter and I'm going to drop it over Munich and blow the fuck out of the city square of the Liberal Party of Canada. And they thought, well, that went okay. All things considered.
And by the way, Kory, Chrystia Freeland, not the most difficult person to read body language or facial expressions on, right?
Yeah. Well, but this brings it back to, this was done by Zoom, allegedly. So were cameras on or cameras off? Like, these are questions that we maybe need to be asking, you know?
But do we? Like, that's insane on the face of it. And I think the other thing that's really important is that they didn't just arrive at that meeting and this was sort of the first bit of bad news, right? So we're in a context where Mark Carney's been appointed to this like whatever committee to sort of advise in her area of work, right? And then okay, she's being sidelined in the Canada-US negotiations, maybe because Trump doesn't like her, maybe other reasons. And then, okay, now we have a drip of stories about conflict between the PMO and finance, and the PM is just letting that sit there. And so there's like a series of humiliations that lead to this moment where he is just giving her this absolute piece of shit and saying like, please enjoy this wonderful treat that I've prepared for you. I think that for the team around the prime minister to not have appreciated what must be her accumulated state of mind, what would anybody's state of mind be in that situation?
Telford in Manhattan is the
remarkable.
chef's kiss on this, is the absolute chef's kiss on this story. It's funny as hell.
For sure. The other thing, just as a teeny weeny little asterisk on all this, how invisible was Mark Carney yesterday? His name is in the middle of all this. He is harder to find than the Higgs boson particle. He is like gone, right? Forget it. I'm undetectable, which I don't blame him for sure would have been my advice. But anyway, what were they thinking? I don't know.
How do you think? Seriously, honest question. How could they have misread the meeting, Jordan? You were trying to go down that road. They must have said this is going to be a terrible meeting. She's going to be mad at us because we've been undercutting her for weeks. And now we're going in and we're going to deliver this terrible message. Yeah. Right? I mean, somebody should have been babysitting her all weekend.
I think also, though, she has been one of the most loyal defenders of the prime minister. She has stood by his side through all of the stuff that occurred in the fall. She has been his defender. She's been his surrogate. She's really done so much and is so closely associated with Trudeau. I think that it's also just very possible that they didn't entertain that she would be disloyal in that way. I think that they maybe made the assumption that she viewed her own political career as so tied to Justin Trudeau's that she wouldn't sink the whole ship, right? Because it would be damaging to her, and also that she was bringing this loyalty to the table. And to be really frank, I do think that, in politics, loyalty is one of the highest currencies. And so what he did to her is also really a stunning payback for what she has done for him over the years. And I think
start with running, by the way. Just start with running.
Yeah.
He was nothing. The party was nothing. She was somebody, right? Her greatest act for him was running, right? I mean, she's been a good minister in some respects, whatever, right? But the credibility she lent him when she left Reuters to come and run in a by-election for the third place party was astonishing.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And anyway, so I can't help but think that they dramatically misjudged how she viewed her own future, and how she understood loyalty as well.
Well, you got to think that as the most loyal member of her inner circle, maybe with the exception of Don LeBlanc, they're probably thinking something like, well, if Freeland's against us and comes out against us, literally fucking no one in this party or caucus or cabinet would be supporting us at that point. And they're right, by the way. And there we are. Yeah. And there we are. Mm.
And yet, I think he's going to soldier on. Like, he's going to try.
We'll see. He may try.
I don't know.
It may not be over, but the band's playing Auld Lang Syne.
I don't know how you put out a line from the prime minister's office. I mean, first of all, there were clear indications of the kind of like, listen, just want to give you guys all a technical heads up, but something's going to go down. Clear indications yesterday that at 2:00 he was going to address the House and he was going to prorogue and announce his resignation. And then that got reneged, and the signal was literally like the phrase was, well, he's considering resigning and he's considering proroguing. Well, you can't put out a public line saying, I'm considering resigning. So I don't know. To me, I interpreted, and I'm sure I'm wrong about this, but I interpreted the silence yesterday as an indication that he had made up his mind, that he intended and intends to resign, and that he had just decided, well, since I know that I'm just going to try to catch my breath, at least like write a goddamn speech, to put a capstone on my career. I'm going to figure that out tonight, gather myself, not try to jam it all into one day. I'll take control of this thing tomorrow. So I keep expecting that today, being Tuesday, that he would make this move. But I really don't know what to expect, because to me, his behavior and their behavior indicates that he's already made up his mind to resign. Otherwise, you would take to the microphones, try to control the situation, say you're going to stand and fight. And the fact that he hasn't leads me to conclude that he must have decided that he's going to resign, except it's entirely possible, these guys, that they would just not do that and that he'll just kind of blunder along.
Some of you hurly-burlyites know, only because I've mentioned it before on the show, I went to school to become a lawyer. LLB, University of Saskatchewan. Did I ever actually practice law? I did not. I give you this piece of my backstory because this latest installment from our presenting sponsor Telus revolves around the law and the courts, and there's jargon involved. Legal jargon I'm no longer hep to. Still, I'll do my best to put it in simple language. Telus is going to court, more precisely federal court. They are asking the court to quash the federal cabinet order to the CRTC. I've been outlining the story for weeks now. The cabinet order directs the CRTC to reconsider whether competitors like our presenting sponsor Telus are able to offer internet services in Ontario and Quebec. Telus is taking this action on behalf of Canadian consumers who deserve the benefits more competition brings in the marketplace. They're that serious about protecting consumer choice and affordability for Canadians. You don't need a law degree to see that. And whether you've been following all along or you're just hearing this for the first time, it's likely you have questions. Like, why is the federal cabinet putting themselves in the position of picking corporate winners and losers when more competition, no matter where that competition comes from, provides more value to consumers? Why restrict access to new innovative product bundles that can deliver more affordable solutions overall? And why not give people the right to choose their own internet provider? Telus has those same questions, and they're fighting to get answers. I'll just finish this up by saying this is an issue people, not shockingly, care about. There are over 25,000 signatures on the change.org petition. That figure grows in number and purpose every day. Please add your name at demandmoreinternetchoice.ca. Kory, would you have sent him out yesterday?
I don't know whether I'd send him out yesterday to do it. I think they were so unprepared, and I think there's so many questions that you're going to have to answer around leadership, transition, like all about it. Are you going to stay on? Leadership race is going on, probably. Is the leadership race some sort of vote by caucus expedited affair, or
not to resign? I didn't mean to resign, Kory. I mean, would you have sent him out to say something? Let's assume he wants to stay. Would you have sent him out to say something yesterday?
Well, if he wants to stay, he should have gone out for sure.
Yeah.
It looks like they were changing their minds a lot yesterday. Like, we were on a panel, Scott, like watching that painful setup at Reid Hall with the microphone and the book.
We were talking about armchairs and throw rugs for an hour and a half,
Well, and he was going to and they set up a second mic outside, and he and Dom were going to walk from Rideau Cottage over.
Just like 2015.
And wave at everybody going in, and then they were going to do that, and then there was a uni mic.
Everything's normal, David. I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing to see.
How much sense did that
They were getting media were getting a 2-minute warning for the walk by, and then that didn't happen. And then I don't know what happened to the mics, but they got kicked to the curb. Just a painful, sheepish smile by the Prime Minister as he's signing the papers. And then they scuttled off like that was somehow part of the plan or what would normally occur. So I think it was all being improvised. I think there's probably some merit in Scott's speculation that it was going to be one thing and then it became something else. But yeah, if he was going to stay, you would put him out and you demonstrate some confidence and and indicate that well, this is a tough day, but I'm sticking it out. Saying that you're considering resigning is a way of saying you're resigning. Like we've said this a whole bunch of times. You are 100% staying until you're 100% leaving, and you just can't live in that world of in between.
Yeah. Hey, Jordan, when I read the letter, let's talk about the letter for a minute. Let's talk about the letter. When I read the letter, one of the first things I thought of is, boy, when people break up with Trudeau, they really break up with Trudeau. Like, they fucking are done with him when they're done with him.
Yeah, they've been thinking about it for a while.
Yeah, and because that was an angry letter that was designed to do him maximum damage.
Totally.
In every respect.
Absolutely.
The timing of it, the content of it. The content was devastating. To me, the most devastating thing you could possibly say to anybody is you're putting your own personal political interest ahead of the national interest. And she said it explicitly, right? Totally. And my God, why, other than just pique or anger, why do you think the letter might have been constructed as it was?
Well, I think it's exactly as you said. She constructed it for maximum damage, to create maximum contrast between herself and the Prime Minister. And I do have to say, we have been very critical of her communication skills on the show. And holy cow,
she should have always been writing.
But it turns out that writing is 100% very impactful, super clear, no notes. That letter was incredible as a piece of political communication. Yeah. So she goes after the GST and the rebate checks, calling them political gimmicks. So undermining the idea that the Prime Minister has any genuine solutions on the affordability crisis, that it's just sort of desperate gesturing at this point. She talks about the danger of the party being seen as focused on themselves rather than on people. And I think that piece, you're right, is the most devastating, because that is absolutely the Achilles heel of the Liberal Party in this moment, of this government that's now sort of circling the drain in this inward focus as people in the real world continue to struggle, continue to deal with rising unemployment numbers and huge amounts of anxiety about the situation. They're looking to Ottawa and seeing people running around having fraught caucus meetings about whether somebody is or isn't going to resign, and we don't know who the finance minister is. It's just a shit show. And the other thing I thought that stuck out that was also very damaging and just like so strategic was talking about the need for the federal government to work in good faith and humility with the premiers to confront the tariff threat with Ford. And wow, isn't that a devastating indictment?
Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so she's just basically saying that the federal approach up until now has not been those things. It has not been in good faith, that the Prime Minister has not led it with humility, and that it's not effective. I think, of course, the other piece in the letter that was really interesting is that, she's conceding that the Liberals are not going to win the next election, but she's talking about the importance of positioning the party for survival in this existential moment. Because things are so bad now, there's really no path, but we have to think about preserving our connection with voters. And these are all the ways I disagree. So I think that, and then of course she concludes with leaving the door very just wide open in terms of her own political future as a potential leadership candidate. All of this accomplished, in one page, and that she waited for absolute maximum impact to drop that letter. I think it's she's very smart. And it really, I was cheering for her yesterday. Like she was treated terribly, and this is pretty much the most complete form of payback you can imagine somebody executing in that position.
Well, I haven't seen a revenge fantasy, played out so perfectly since the Kill Bill series.
That's right. It really was like Kill Bill.
Awesome.
But, as they always say about relationships, if they didn't end badly, they probably wouldn't end, right? So, when it was over, it was really over. But the biggest boss move, I think, of the whole Sword affair yesterday was her going to caucus and getting a standing ovation, and then her going to the fundraiser and getting a standing ovation. It's like, hey, look at me. I am here. I'm not going away. Nobody's putting baby in the corner. This notion of I'm going to stick it out and I'm going to force you to look at what you've done. It's like very big Taylor Swift vibes too. Hey, listen to all this powerful woman stuff.
She is in her reputation era. She's in her reputation era. She can do it with a broken heart, but she doesn't need to.
Ed Greenspun had a great line yesterday.
But she knows how it ends.
He said, when I first met Chrystia Freeland, she was 19 years old, hanging around with Ukrainian dissidents, pissing off the Russians. I don't think she was intimidated by going to the caucus meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah. But it is a boss move. It is a boss move.
Yeah. I want to draw a circle around one thing that we've passed, but I really want to zero in on it. I think she made two decisions. First of all, how ironic is it? This was pointed out to me on the day the Canada Post is ordered back. Justin Trudeau's career is effectively ended by a piece of letter mail, but that's a weird turn in 2024. But she made two decisions when she wrote this letter, in my view.
And that's genuinely ironic. That's not Alanis Morissette ironic. That's right. Genuinely ironic.
Right. It's not like fly in my soup or hand in my pocket. Fuck. She made two decisions. One was to resign, and the other was to launch her leadership. And I don't think that we should be under an illusion that that's exactly how explicit it was, because the force, I don't think it was anger. I think it was calculation. I think that having made up her mind, when she critiqued so severely and explicitly in the letter, his approach, his policies, his priorities, his motivations, even his character, and then says, and I am sticking around and going nowhere, then shows up and draws the two standing ovations, as we've mentioned. For someone who we've often criticized her political skills, this is the most powerful political play of her career and one of the most that we've witnessed in recent history. And she has instantly turned doubters into sympathizers and positioned herself with a feminist backwind, with an insurgent, with a change dimension now, because she's utterly severed from the Trudeau years now. She now is a response to Trudeau, all of those things, and she's positioning herself, because I don't think that Trudeau can survive this. And we haven't delved into that greatly, but I just don't think it's survivable. So he's either going to resign the next day or two under his own terms, so to speak, or he's going to get dragged and it will be somewhere in January. It'll just be gruesome. So she's instantly positioned herself again as a front runner, a place where she was maybe 2 years ago, and
because she had been written off really as a
that's the caution I want to place on this, right? I think this letter was an incredible power move. I think she's put herself in the most advantageous position, one that I couldn't even imagine she could have pulled off. 48 hours ago, I could not have seen this, but I still think when push comes to shove and there's a leadership race, that doesn't make her the best candidate to lead the party, but she has, because I don't think that her communication skills have suddenly improved overnight, but boy, oh boy, has she shaken up the tenor of this potential, I think, certain race and altered her position within it. This is a leadership manifesto of this letter.
Well, it's been a year, hasn't it? You'd be forgiven for thinking it hasn't exactly overflowed with charity and kindness. Social media and our airwaves just seem to brim with all sorts of ugliness. Granted, a lot of it originated far away, but still, everything slops over onto everything else nowadays. No wonder we're reading reports about people clamping their eyes shut and simply refusing to take in news stories. Anyway, I can proudly say we've managed to keep the conversation pretty civil on this pod. In fact, I would humbly submit that we set a bar for listening to one another across party lines, across culture battlefields, and generally across the public square. I know that is a big reason that our sponsor, CN, continues to sponsor us. The railway is similarly inclined. Its railroaders, as I have said here many times, keep Canada's economy moving, day in, day out, year in, year out. And the company itself has in word and deed helped bind the disparate regions of this nation together for more than a century. Its first message after the U.S. elections last month was that Canadians and Americans cooperate in a million ways to their mutual benefit every day. And that's where CN's focus will remain in the turbulent months to come. In the spirit of the season, CN wants to wish health and happiness to all its stakeholders, its customers, and all of you, gentle listeners. Is it too corny to say be kind to someone? To stop and thank the person bagging your groceries or driving the bus? I don't think it's a stretch to say that's the Canadian way. While I'm at it, I'd also like to say this. As we gather with family in the next few weeks, CN railroaders will continue to run trains in that cold outside, baby, enabling all the comforts we take for granted. That's worth a thank you too. Kory, how do you think that plays with the general public? I mean, I think that Scott was talking a little bit about the internal leadership machinations in the Liberal Party, but in terms of a prospect to the general public, is she now the anti-Trudeau, or is she still Trudeau's 2IC for his entire tenure?
Well, I'm going to hazard to make a prediction here that if somebody does a poll a few days or a week from now, her numbers are going to be way up.
Yeah.
And we've seen this time and time again when somebody, turns on a leader in a dispute like this. Like, think back to Helena Gurgis, and she was sort of the biggest dummy in the Harper cabinet, and look at her, giving shit to people at a airport security checkpoint. What an entitled bitch. Like, that was basically the narrative that the media had on her until she got tossed from cabinet and, sued Guy Giorno and a bunch of other people about how that shouldn't have happened. Then she was the cause celeb. She was the smartest person to have ever darkened the door of the cabinet room. And what a principled person. So, you can go from a complete see you next Tuesday, terrible person in the media and the public persona. And then all the people who were saying that a week later are saying like, oh my God, I haven't seen somebody this principled or talented in all my years of watching politics. And so I think you're going to see some version of that play out. And, as we did with, Jody Wilson-Raybould, like go up and down through the list. Like, this story has been told so many times. You're never as great as when you decide to turn on an unpopular leader.
Well, and there is particular power in it, I think, for her right now, because it does fit into a narrative about Justin Trudeau and his intolerance of strong women who challenge him within cabinet. And for better or for worse, that has become a narrative, particularly because of what happened with Jane Philpott. Yep. And so now there's a story that this
maybe they're the only people who challenge him.
Yep.
Maybe those are the only people who challenge.
I mean, Lord knows that even the Liberal caucus members can't seem to get it together to.
Because in my experience, he doesn't like to be challenged by men either.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there haven't been any.
I was pouring through the quotes of who was the weaseliest and most yellow-bellied in their comments around this, and I think McGuinty was right up there. But people saying, "Oh well, I couldn't."
That was a visibly uncomfortable scrum, I will just say.
Yeah.
Well, he woke up in the morning to read that Carney was running in his riding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm unwilling to say. I think that there should
maybe
be
he had a meeting on Friday also.
Yeah, could have been, but yeah. Look, we've seen this story play out a bunch of times. The fact it happened after his finger wagging speech, though, around women in politics south of the border is just so rich. It's just so rich and such a perfect element.
It's so perfect.
This guy has been anything but a feminist in practice. Anything but.
So
it's like symbolism above actual things.
So does her action then, if you're agreed that this is a big boost for her leadership, does this action then put pressure on other Liberal cabinet ministers who want to run for the leadership to cut some distance with Trudeau themselves? And I think particularly of Dominic LeBlanc, who clearly did have leadership aspirations, has a campaign team being put together, and now he has tied himself inextricably to the Prime Minister.
Well, you got to think that that's at least partially affected by the notion this might be a caucus vote as opposed to a larger leadership. I think Dom probably has a really good chance of winning if that's the selection process. But in a more wide open race, I think it'd be more challenging for him. And I say that despite the fact I think he's an incredibly talented guy. In terms of just being a political athlete and being able to deliver a message. And I think in terms of leadership races, being able to have caucus support and put together a team, I think he's got all those things. But maybe less, larger public persona, and certainly Freeland would be many multiples better known than he is in the wider world of politics as you move out beyond the corridors of Ottawa.
To define what stage we're going to be in, because if it's a positioning for leadership because Trudeau has decided to pack it in and has acknowledged that, then I think the implications for someone like Dom of being finance minister, I don't think they're quite as grave as if we're in a stage where people are literally saying, oh my God, he's not going to go. So then who is going to then separate themselves from him? Who's going to, so you're going to get a bunch of caucus members. I mean, we've already seen 5 or 6 of them. I see Yvonne Baker's out this morning. So you're seeing those folks go. So then the question is going to be, well, what about cabinet ministers? Will they actually use their position, their influence, their voice, even if it means costing them their job, to call for the prime minister to step aside? Will they place that pressure? And is that an advantage for them in a leadership race because it looks like they're separating from them? Or do they want to be John Major and allow Chrystia Freeland to be Michael Heseltine? So how are people calculating that out? And if he doesn't go, I'll be surprised if you don't see a couple of cabinet ministers come out pretty quickly.
I think you're going to definitely see that.
I'm leaving.
Most of cabinet decided to skulk in the back door to the cabinet meeting, but Anita Anand didn't. And that was a choice. And I think she was skirting up to the line of saying something pretty.
She came damn close. You could tell almost to the point where I was watching it live and thinking, you know what, maybe you do need to take a step back, because I think you could see that she was working herself up, and that was an honest scrum, and she was on the verge of saying, I am fucking mad, and she stopped short of it, but you could tell that was brewing.
But you could foresee that if he doesn't take steps in the next 24 hours to resign, and there's a realization on the part of people in cabinet that he needs another shove, cabinet resignations are that push.
It's almost the only mechanism, I think, that's available.
But and do you think that a Melanie Joly is going to feel pressure to do that, given what Freeland did?
Absolutely.
And given the Carneys out there. So there's 2 anti-Trudeaus out there now, right?
Yeah.
What do you think,
do you want to be the last one in? Probably not.
I think it's a really difficult judgment for those folks, because there's an attractiveness to being on the sort of the right side of the argument if that means pushing him to leave. And maybe there's a logic to having distance from him. But I'm always preoccupied by the Heseltine, John Major thing. I do think there will be others who will be I think Jolie will really struggle with it in terms of saying to herself, well, I'll let others, throw the body check. I'd like to wait in front of the goal for the pass.
So let me give you another example to the Heseltine Major thing, which is when Gordon Campbell was forced out of the premiership in BC over his imposing the HST despite having promised not to impose the HST in the election that immediately preceded it. I saw polling that said that the only people who could possibly win an election for the Liberal Party were people who had not been part of the cabinet that made that decision, because British Columbians were ascribing collective guilt to the government for its actions. And that anybody who'd been a cabinet minister, whether or not they had anything to do with taxation policy, was tarred with the same brush. And only somebody coming in from the outside could possibly have a chance. Are we not in that situation?
Probably, but that's not the same calculation as winning the leadership, right? And that's what people will
Well, but isn't being able to win an election the essential precondition to winning the Liberal leadership?
Well, look, I don't think any of these people are going to win the next election. Like, I think
Right.
I
Or
think
do
it's
better.
too far
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But like, I think you got to redefine what a win is for the Liberal Party in this circumstance. Right. Like, a win is
30 points and 100 seats.
Not being wiped off the fucking map. But I think that's what a win is. And, I think you got to be distancing yourself from Trudeau if you want to occupy that space. I think, as we said, Freeland took some pretty huge steps in that direction. Others who want to be in that role, if they, the more you're distant from him, I think probably the better you're going to do. But there has to be some acknowledgement that what's happening isn't working, and a pivot to have any credibility. And, that'll be the challenge for the Doms of the world, and would have been a fatal challenge, I think, for Freeland. But I think what she did yesterday has changed the math on that considerably.
All right, let's move ahead and talk about what's going to happen to Trudeau in the next while. I thought much of yesterday, I thought this might go down quickly, and I thought we might have a relatively quick departure from him. But now I'm worried that he's going to be able to limp into Christmas and disappear for the holidays and come back on his own timing, and God knows what happens. Let me break my embargo and tell you what Coletto found last night for Abacus. 1,186 interviews from 5 p.m. to 8:45 a.m. this morning. First of all, 42% were following the resignation closely. 19% hadn't heard of it.
Big penetration.
Ballot question. Conservatives, 45. Liberals, 20. NDP, 18. Trudeau favorable, 20. Negative, 63. Favorable was down 3. Negative was up 2. Negative 43 is the worst net favorable they have ever measured on him. Should the Prime Minister resign? Yes, 67%. Stay, 19%.
Yeah, those are devastating numbers, but listen to that NDP number. That's why for all of the "it's time for him to go" talk from Jagmeet Singh, they're not going.
Well, in that by-election last night, I mean, they are not picking up anything from the Liberal decline. They're fucking losing their own votes, right?
Yeah, BC is going to be challenging for them, but I do think that they're now in a situation where I think it's going to be very difficult for them to go past the first confidence vote when the House returns. So there's no mechanism really for them right now. That will come in January, February when the first confidence vote comes. But I think actually it's going to be pretty hypothetical. At that point, I think that it's more than likely that Trudeau will be pushed out internally, even if he doesn't want to go on his own today.
Yeah. All right, Scott, spin it out for us. How does this go down for Trudeau? I mean, a lot of things can unravel, or this somnambulant, acquiescent party could just sit around and watch him.
Yeah, it's a very real possibility. I think that if he attempts to stay in the presence of these numbers and what I think will be a gathering chorus, not just, by the way, like we're now at a place where it won't just be man on the street interviews on CP24. It won't just be, conservative critics. You're going to start to see, I think, other people come off the sidelines and say, the Prime Minister, you're going to start to see things like expressed in terms of national interest with the Trump and the tariff issue. So you start to see significant business leaders and maybe even union leaders come forward and say, like, he's got to go. So I think he's in for 100 miles of bad road. And then I think probably you'll get a couple of cabinet ministers that'll accelerate the crisis. And then ultimately the tool available will be that caucus will call for an emergency meeting, and they will insist upon a private ballot. And I think they'll be able to do that. I don't know that the Prime Minister and his office are in a position where they'll be able to stop it. So if I was going to predict and guess, in a world where he tries to stay and seems like he wants to be indifferent about leaving, I think it's probably some combination of events like that. And then I think probably the coup de grace will be a caucus vote, and that they won't be able to halt. And he'll probably It'll sort of remind me a little bit of Chrétien, how Chrétien was flying to that summer caucus and had the intention of going forward, but then realized that it was curtains, and so at the last minute had to pull the plug. I think rationally, as we say this on Tuesday morning, I think watching what he did and didn't do yesterday, looking at the situation and imagining how it's going to unfold, I assume that he will step down either today on Tuesday or tomorrow on Wednesday. But, their ability to defy expectations.
I'll bet you, as I don't think he does.
I don't think he resigns.
Today, I'll bet you $5. And my bet is that he is going to fucking try to hang around for the G7. And if the caucus lets him, holy mother of Christ. Right?
Well, because I do worry that that's a critical priority on his part. And, he may really, this Chrétien comparison could get very explicit, where he could say, all right, well, listen, I'm going to, I'll leave, but I don't want to leave until July or something like that. But then how do you make that math work? Like the government will collapse, prior to that point. Singh will have no option but to roll the dice and to not vote and to vote non-confidence. So how do you preserve it? I mean, you can prorogue the House, but you can only do that for 2 to 3 months and then allow that leadership race. I don't know how does he design a mechanism that allows him to remain for the G7?
Kory, you've seen a few candidates, you've seen a few leaders in this situation flailing around. How does this game out?
Well, as we've talked about before, people wait until all other options or avenues are no longer available to them, and I think we're seeing what that looks like right now. Like, I think there's more cabinet ministers that are going to go, and look, what did we not talk about in this program that would have led and dominated the whole conversation absent Freeland? Sean Fraser gone, like one of the handful of bright lights. In terms of, having some political talent, I would say, there's some mixed baggage in his background in terms of...
Sorry to interrupt, Kory, but by the way, do you guys remember yesterday, there was about a 10-minute spin cycle of how rude and offensive it was for Freeland to step on Sean Fraser's newser, right? Yeah. That evaporated quickly, but that was there for a minute. It's like, oh my God, that's a very gauche move.
No. But I think you could see more defections. We already talked about Anita Anand. Like, she looked like she was on the cusp of doing it. I think
Mark Holland had to be asked twice yesterday if he intended to remain.
Holland's another guy who, his answer that I'm in it for the long haul is not really an answer to whether or not when the question is, do you support the leader? Like, that's. I'm not going to be driven out. Like, I don't know. There's so many ways to interpret that. None of them are good for Trudeau. So you're talking about some pretty important people in Liberal land, and I think the hits are going to keep on coming until he leaves. And he's clearly a delusional narcissist when it comes to these matters. But even for somebody who is as delusional as he has been over the last while, at a certain point, reality does hit you like the pavement when you have jumped off a building.
Yeah,
I mean, he's done, but he's going to be the last person to know it. I think that's the reality of how this is going to play out, and that is the most painful possible outcome for that cabinet, that caucus, and that party.
Do you know anybody, Scott, who wants him to stay?
It's a troubling question because it sounds so almost abusive, but the answer is no. And I'm sure there must be. I'm sure there must be members of Parliament who feel that way. But in all honesty, when I talk to members of Parliament and talked to a handful of them yesterday, they're all talking about how do we end this mother scratching agony, right? Like, it wasn't like any of them are saying, God, you know what? We really got to it's time to sharpen some sticks and build a trench. We're going to fight this thing out. That sentiment doesn't exist.
He's not leader through support right now. He's leader through a technicality. If there was a mechanism to remove him, he'd be removed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, political gravity in the end will be the mechanism. It has to be. I think that there's no way that he meaningfully survives this. He is injured beyond return.
But I am fascinated if he stays, how, to your question, David, how the way in which people play their cards will affect their prospects for leadership. Is it imperative for people to separate themselves and to be seen in the future as having stood up and said you should go? Or is that harmful because people will say, well, I'd like to put that I know that we had to pry him out, but I don't want to think about that. I don't like that unpleasantness. So I don't want to reward those who did that. Friedland clearly has propelled herself back into a position, I think, of, if not, front runner status. She's positioned herself as strongly as she possibly can. Like how this stage unfolds and how cabinet ministers and would-be leadership aspirants play their cards, I think is really going to be determinative.
I kind of disagree with that a bit, Scott. Like, I think this is like the assassination of Julius Caesar. Like, Brutus is Chrystia Freeland, and all of the other daggers from all of the other senators are pretty fucking anonymous. It's, the mortal blow is being struck. And I think it's being struck in a way that differentiates her and has probably helped her leadership ambitions if she has any. And I think now it's, blood in the water, shark feeding frenzy sort of situ.
I'm trying to figure out, Kory, who Mark Antony is in your scenario. Who gives the "for Freeland is an honorable woman" speech?
Yeah,
it can only be Don LeBlanc, guys.
But
that man's affability is holding up the whole government right now.
Yeah, probably. Wonder who. That makes me then wonder who's
that A&W. The A&W photo op is incomparable. Like, I'm sure it was just happenstance because that's sort of Dom. I was surprised, but like it. It's a perfect little punctuation.
If it's deliberate, which it may be, maybe it isn't. It's comms genius, and if it's accidental comms genius, then well, so be it. But
I believe that Dom can both like A&W and like some of the finer establishments in the country.
Well, I fall into that camp too. That's what you say.
I almost went to A&W for breakfast
caviar.
this morning at 6 a.m. I was damn tempted, and it's in a gas station near my house. I will have breakfast in a gas station many a morning. Look at me.
We got a couple minutes. Let's quickly talk about the implications for the other parties. And I'll just start by saying I thought that Poilievre had a good day yesterday. I thought he handled himself well. I thought his question period performance was out and out funny. I laughed at his question to the Minister of Finance. It was all good. I watched Singh's scrum, and I thought it was a goddamn nightmare. Because the Trudeau has to quit, but I still have confidence in the government line is a really fucking tough line to walk.
Yeah, I didn't hear him say exactly that, but I think it was a hard spot. There was not a good reaction for him or a good response, I think, available to him. By choosing to say that they don't have confidence in the PM, I think the obvious quid pro quo is if you get rid of this guy, maybe we have a possible path forward. But if you don't, then the axe is coming down. I thought that Poilievre, it was interesting. His reaction, I think, evolved over the course of the day. His first scrum, I thought, was actually not good. I thought it was too flippant. He has to walk a line. He needs to look more worried than gleeful. And I think he didn't hit that right note, particularly at the start of the day. The QP performance was a little bit better, but I think it still strayed in that direction. The instincts that I think serve him probably quite well most of the time can be a bit of a double-edged sword in a moment like this. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the next few days.
I'm going to say that I'm not going to say that he's done anything wrong until he drops below 45% in the fucking
right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
In my eminent wisdom, here are his 10 problems.
Maybe the party at 18 points should be taking notes from the party at 45 when doling out the comms advice. I thought his QP line was fucking hilarious, and the only thing that really was going to get clipped from them for that day. And I thought it was great. But like, look, this was all about the government and the government melting down, and the right comms advice, aside from, I think, getting that jab in, is to step back and let the train go off the bridge, and stay out of the way, stay away from the wreckage. So I thought. I thought that was good. Like, the other thing we haven't talked about is the premiers were meeting yesterday, and that struck a pretty stark contrast to the chaos going on in Ottawa. And I think they were trying to put out a message of some unity and stability and some seriousness. But man, oh man, like, what a mess, and a mess at an important time. Like, who was thinking about the trade fight with the Americans and the serious topics? Well, the premiers were. There's nobody in Ottawa thinking about any of that shit yesterday. Like, the government is in full-on crisis panic mode. Like, they're not present. There is nobody at the fucking wheel steering right now. No one.
There's a really important implication for Trudeau, this timing, all of these questions we talked about earlier, I think, coming out of that. And that is this: if he were to move today on the Tuesday as we record and say, I'm stepping down, I think he will face challenge from people. If he says, I'm stepping down, it's going to be a leadership race, it's going to prorogue the House for 2-3 months. I think there'll be pushback with people saying, yes, but as long as you stay as prime minister, that's not acceptable. But he'll be able to withstand that pressure. But if he waits and he tries to drag this thing out in January and his own cabinet and caucus have to pull him out by the heels, he will lose the ability to claim that he wishes to stay and should stay. And that will evaporate even in that in that interregnum period. I'll just say this. I want to add one thing about the opposition leaders. I agree. Poilievre, I thought, did a good job in defying his usual instincts to barge in like the Kool-Aid guy into the fight. Like, he did the obvious thing, which was, hey, this government, you guys are out of gas. Could you just call an election? Wrote line, that's fine. Funny crack about finance minister, and then just got the fuck out of the way. Like, that to me was that's the only right thing to do. Don't put your hands all over it. Don't look lethal. Don't look angry. Just get out of the way. And Singh doesn't have that option, because Singh is Johnny on the spot, because his votes get to determine whether or not this parliament continues. And I thought, like you guys, he looked like a bug under a shot glass. And I don't know that he can stay in that position much longer, which is another very worrying factor for the cabinet, because they have to assume that if this House doesn't prorogue, this House will fall. And
I don't understand, Scott. Let's just go right there. I do not understand why the NDP would let the Liberals change their leader. Why would they? Like, surely to God, they want to run against the weakest version of the Liberal Party. We all agree that the 2024 Trudeau is the weakest version of the Liberal Party that could be on offer.
They have competing imperatives, though, because yes, it's true that they would prefer to run against Trudeau, but they also have to differentiate and create more space from Trudeau. And so this is the moment when those imperatives collide. I think that the bet that they are making is that he is going to be gone one way or the other within the next days or at most couple weeks, and that this is something that they'll be facing that situation regardless. It's not going to be necessarily on their hands, but their imperative for the moment, as you saw Singh, trying to get that clean headline breaking from Trudeau, is to create that differentiation.
Carney could be better for them.
Carney would be good.
I think Carney could be better for the NDP, because Trudeau is such a progressive wet that he is crowding the NDP a bit on the left. I think having somebody who is more of a central casting Bay Street douchebag is actually probably quite appealing.
Well, that's not his campaign slogan.
No, his campaign slogan is
the
T-shirts are off.
Affordability.
Bay Street douchebag.
Here for you.
The best argument for Mark Carney to lead the Liberal Party is how fucking crazy the Conservatives are about that idea. To a person, all day long yesterday on the socials, they're going after Carney. They're going after Carney. Carney this, Carney that. They weren't talking about Jolie. They weren't talking about Dom LeBlanc. They weren't going after anybody else.
Well, I think
if you follow people by how they behave,
is a Liberal leadership change as well.
Absolutely, but the person they fear is Carney, and this is obvious to me.
Well, I know no one can speak as personally about the affordability crisis. Perhaps I could, about how caviar prices have skyrocketed since the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. It's outrageous what's going on out there. He is the guy who's going to help fix that and put issues like that in the window around affordability. Look, I think Carney is. I don't look. Everyone is better than Trudeau, I think, in terms of the general electorate. But if you're going to talk about the NDP, I think they're better to have a more right-wing version of the Liberal Party present itself than a more left-wing one. Like, I just think it creates more space for them. So
I think that's one dynamic, Kory. That's one dynamic, Kory. So there's the squeezing on ideological grounds, but there's also the squeezing on winnability grounds. Because I believe if the Liberals got to 30, the NDP couldn't hold at 20. Right?
That's probably true.
Well, I think obviously they would love both, right? But they are fishing for votes. Like 2/3 of the votes they're looking for are those red-orange switchers. And so it is true that Carney and a more firmly centrist Liberal government that's breaking from Trudeau would give them the ability to fish maybe a bit more easily in that pond.
You guys are cracked. You guys are cracked. David Coletto gave us the answer here exclusively on the pod. Like, I'll read it back to you because I wrote down what Herle said. 67% want Trudeau to go. A net 43 negative approval rating. Those numbers mean that Justin Trudeau is the absolute number one draft pick of every party that isn't the Liberal Party of Canada. Come fucking on.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the rest of it is over-analysis nonsense.
But
look, I agree with that.
I don't think he can stay. He's going to try.
Trudeau is the worst, but then you get into second worst.
We're moving on already, Scott.
Who's better for whom? But I thought we agreed earlier. Trudeau ain't staying, so the conversation becomes quite relevant.
David's point was, why wouldn't the NDP move in this horse's latitude time to withdraw consent and confidence and force an election before Trudeau gets a chance to slip out of town?
You're asking like a question about the nature of a being here. Like, why does the NDP do unstrategic things at the federal level? It's
Kory.
because it's the federal NDP. Come on. It's
could have made it a more exciting day if he'd withdrawn confidence yesterday.
Why does a crow cough?
Okay, but he did effectively. There's no vote happening this week. There's no vote happening this week.
He was asked 100 times, and he did not do that.
Yeah, I think he went as far. I think he went as far down that road as was useful to him.
No, he could have provoked an election and destroyed the Liberal Party.
He can't provoke an election. There's no vote, David. There's no vote happening this week unless the government chooses to put one forward in a fit of a suicidal peak. That's the only way they could be defeated this week. So all of this is academic until early February.
So what's the risk of saying it?
Well, effectively, he did.
Well, he didn't.
I don't. He didn't say
when the House next meets, we will vote to bring down the government. When at the first available chance, we will put the blade. And he didn't. Now, maybe he didn't because he figured that was so shit scared the Liberals that they would certainly prorogue and that would give them the mechanism to replace the leader. But I don't believe he was being that strategic. I think he's just in this. I like being on the point of this fence and wiggling my ass all around on it. And I don't think it works.
All right.
There's an image.
There you go. And that's an image that...
And with that
is an image that requires Gordon Pinsent to come in and clean this fucking act up. Gordon, can you please bring some gravitas to this mess?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
All right. Who's got their Hey You?
Sure, I'll go first.
Do it.
All right, baby. Bring it. My Hey You definitely goes out to Mark Carney because I thought yesterday was hysterical for his absence. So much of the early morning was like, well, wait a second. Is Carney going to become finance minister? Is that happening? Like, I had people telling me, so Carney's going to be sworn as finance minister by the end of the day and introduce the Feds. And I'd have to say to them, he can't actually introduce the Feds. He's not in Parliament. And by the way, there's been no indication that he intends to enter cabinet other than a few furious newspaper columns and speculation. So I just thought that the whole scene was hysterical. And as you say, David, it actually, in some ways, I think, benefits him because everybody's talking about him and he doesn't have to put a single dollar on the table.
Jordan?
So a couple things. I just wanted to remark and extend condolences on the passing of Dan Coulter, who's a former BC NDP cabinet minister, MLA, and was to be the incoming provincial director. He passed away really tragically at 49.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was a real. It's been a time, I think, for the BC NDP family this year, and so wanted to extend condolences to everybody out that way. And the second thing is really, I think, to the folks who listen to this show, thank you for being with us as we feel our feelings every week. And it's going to be a pretty tough holiday season for a lot of people. And I know that David knows this because he does a lot of work on the issue of food insecurity. But we have record high food bank use in Canada. Third of the people using food banks are children. Broadly, I think we need to make better policy choices to make sure people are not falling through the cracks. And that is what we will continue to talk about, I'm sure, in the new year. But in the meantime, if you're listening, if you've had an okay year, I hope folks might consider directing a little bit of money towards those organizations in their community who are helping folks through this time. I think it makes a big difference, and I hope people can do that.
Hear, hear. Not that food banks are any fucking solution to that problem.
Right?
I can't believe we're relying on charity to solve this.
That's appalling.
Right. Kory?
So I'm going to do mine to the premiers, as we talked about it for about 10 seconds on this. But while all this chaos unfolds in Ottawa, and I think it could be unfolding for a period of time, there's some really important shit going down around trade and other things, and I think the premiers collectively are going to have to band together and step into that void in as unified a way as is possible. And so my hey you to them would be that I think that's an important thing. And in a related and totally self-serving note, I want to welcome Marshall Smith, who's joining Rubicon, who is Daniel Smith's chief of staff and a big player around that table for the last number of years. And so welcome to you, Marshall.
Yeah. All right, good. I got to hey you, but Jordan, the first thing, I just need to return to the show for a second, because Kory reminded me with his talk of the premiers that I saw Wab Kinew do a hit on TV yesterday after the premiers meeting. And two things. First of all, fuck, he's good. Jesus Christ, he's a good communicator, and that's probably because he seems like a really good person. And that's what comes through in his communications. But the second thing is, he was absolutely unequivocal that we have to hit our 2% NATO target.
Yes, today.
This is not NDP talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And I think his focus on defense policy as an economic stimulus, as a way to solve some domestic problems in addition to placating Trump, it is really interesting. And yeah, he's putting forward, I think, a really compelling agenda, and he is such an authentic communicator.
Well, he should have been writing the Fez, because, they found like another $19 billion in spending on climate change. They didn't find a fucking plug nickel for defense. So basically found the gap to get to 2% in new spending there on a topic area that is seemingly very disconnected from reality.
All right,
was a strange document.
My hey you goes out to Sean Fraser, who did get overlooked yesterday. But when I saw on Sunday night that he was resigning, it came as a huge shock and disappointment to me, because I really think Sean is one of the great political talents in the party, a potential future leader of the party, and a really good guy. And I've come to consider him a friend, and I'm really sad that he's gone. And Sean, thanks for your service, and I really hope I see you again on the trail, and that this is not the end of your political career.
Don't you think he's going to end up as leader of the Nova Scotia Liberals or something like that?
I hope so. That'd be a good thing for him to do. I hope so. All right, folks, that's our show. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Telus, and our sponsor, CN Rail. I want to thank all of you accursed out there for waiting a day and watching and listening to this show. I hope we lived up to your expectations. And I want to thank the three of you for being here this morning after your long day of service yesterday. It was great fun to talk to you again today. Thanks very much.